G'day folks and welcome to the Encounters Down Under podcast. I'm your host Anthony Goodall and I invite guests to the show to share their amazing encounters with aliens and UFOs. If you or someone you know has had an encounter down under or anywhere in the world for our new segment Encounters Unbound, please get in touch with me via the Encounters Down Under Facebook page or email at australianufosightingsattlook.com.au. Be sure to join the Encounters Down Under Facebook page and YouTube channel where you can also get involved during the live stream interviews, sharing your thoughts and opinions during the live show. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to give us a rating and review on your favourite listening platform. But anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get into what you've been waiting for. Kick back and relax with your favourite beverage and enjoy the show. This episode is available to view on our YouTube channel, so be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts on the episode. G'day folks and welcome to another episode of Encounters Down Under. Eesha Patel joins us on the podcast, who claims to be one of the world's foremost authority on first contact and galactic consciousness. We embark into Eesha's history with over a decade of personal experiences and research into extraterrestrials, interdimensionality, and the profound link between consciousness and otherworldly experiences. So please welcome to the show, Eesha. G'day Eesha, how you going?
Hey Anthony, I'm great. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
No, it's a pleasure having you. Sorry for a bit of the half-assed bloody intro there. I'm sort of a bit off my game here tonight, but it's absolutely wonderful having you on. Like, you've been traveling around the world, researching into the first contact. You've been talking to global leaders as well. You also got your own podcast. Look, before we get all into that sort of stuff, tell us how this all first started, where this all come from, sort of thing, like to get you started on this journey of yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, so like you said, I do travel around the world. I have met with a lot of professionals in the industry. My work is being endorsed by people such as Avi Loeb and Jim Peniston. So I've been on quite a journey to research, but also I started on the journey because I'm an experiencer myself, and so I had my first contact with extraterrestrials, or I now know they're interdimensional beings, in 2015. And the first group that I met was the Arcturian Council of Light. So, I mean, there's a good starting point. If you want me to go into the story, I can go into all of that now.
Yeah, by all means, yeah. Look, so obviously people aren't really going to be aware of who you are and where you've been, sort of thing. So, but obviously, what the best way to sort of go on, where you first started, and your first, how this all became about to even go and start in this long journey of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start by saying I didn't always think ETs were real. So it's not. I
That's
think
years
most
away
people
too.
don't wake up one day and just go, "Oh yeah, like this is." I mean, there's a journey, right? So mine started in 2015. I went through a really big sort of life transition. Some would call it a spiritual awakening of sorts. And the process of that awakening is how I then realized that there is much more to the universe than meets the eye. My journey started out with just really, it was just exploration. I many years before that actually had started connecting with just angelic guides and things like that. And so the galactic stuff for me, it initially got lumped in with just all the other sort of otherworldly experiences that I was having. The thing that really kick-started a lot of this for me was learning how to activate my Merkaba light body. Now, a lot of people may not know what that is. So, if I just explain very briefly, it's a specific type of sacred geometry that you use, which is called the Merkaba. And through processes involving visualization, meditation, I learned how to activate this frequency within myself. And after about 18 months of practicing this technique, I had this experience where I was meditating one day, and suddenly it was like, I just dissolved into everything, into nothing. It was like the void and the everythingness all at once. And in that moment, it was like I didn't know where my body ended and where the rest of the universe began. So when I had that experience, I had this voice, this sort of inner voice that came through to me that said, Eesha, you're in the 13th dimension. And at that point in my life, I didn't know anything about dimensions. I didn't know anything about beings. I didn't even know where that voice came from. It just so clearly said to me, you're in the 13th dimension. And I felt it. I felt it so viscerally in my body, this oneness, this connectedness with all that is. And then that was it. I mean, I came out of that experience and I went on Google. I tried to find something to put meaning into the experience that I just had. And there was nothing out there. No one else was talking about the 13 dimensions, not in science, not in spirituality. After pages and pages of scrolling through Google, I found this one website that said something about 12 dimensions. And I was like, well, okay, we're getting somewhere, but I was in the 13th. What is the 13th dimension? So that kind of sparked this deeper exploration. And then a couple of years after that was 2015. I started going through a big transition in life. I left a relationship. I changed careers. A lot of changes were happening around that time. And that's when one night I was laying in bed and I remember just putting it out there and saying, whatever the universe wants from me, I want to be available. I want to be in service. So just tell me what to do. And that was when I had my first telepathic experience of connecting with non-human intelligence.
That's amazing. Like going from like the 13th dimension, I didn't expect that. But as far as I'm aware, like it's like fourth dimension was pretty much as far as we go. So it's like where else can it be like 12 dimensions and then going to a 13th? That's an absolute spin out. So like how are you feeling when you've like sort of had this whole scenario happening there, like being told like especially as voices in your head, like is it like some point you're going like, am I starting to go crazy here, or how do you feel behind all this?
So in the moment when it happened, I felt very calm and blissful, but afterwards the human mind kind of kicked in, and then some of those thoughts started crossing my mind, like, am I going crazy? What is this? But I'm very grateful that even as those experiences were unfolding, I always had enough around me resource wise. Like, I found mentors, I came across books at the right time. I would search something on the internet and suddenly something would pop up. And so I always had just enough there to keep me going. So, it kind of makes me wonder, there's got to be some divine order to the way that all of this unfolded, because I mean, there were so many things that could have gone wrong, and almost impossible for every one of those little things to have gone right, and yet they did. So
Yeah.
it really makes me question this reality, and whether there's really a greater picture out there in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people that I speak to, it's always sort of come to like a spiritual concept behind this whole universe. People saying that, like, they're contacting spirits or aliens or beings of some sort. But they're always saying it's like a higher self or some sort of spiritual awakening that we're still waiting for to be even be able to reach these heights or something like. And not everyone's adapted to it. Because, obviously everyone's all heads down in their phones these days. There, no one's really waking up into the whole world and environment, and all sorts of stuff there. But it's yeah, it's always been intriguing, like how this sort of works there and why it's so neglected. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Like, why is it so hard for humanity itself to sort of reach out in a spiritual sense?
This is a question I have frequently asked myself, because there's conflicting rhetoric around this. On the one hand, you hear people that say, well, everything's within us, we have access to everything. And yet you look at the world around you and go, well, yeah, that's great. That might be a nice idea, but people aren't. So what is stopping them from having these experiences? And I've spent a lot of time in the healing arts as well. I've got almost 10 years experience as an energy healer, and the healing aspect of this actually started through my galactic connections, which I can talk about momentarily. But as a result of doing a lot of healing sort of sessions and work with people, I realized that there's fundamentally a couple of things that prevent people from knowing these universal truths. The first is a lot of the time it's trauma. When we come through the veil and we come here to planet Earth, we forget our connection to the divine, and that is by design. We are here to have a human experience, and we go under the veil willingly, and we choose to be here, but we know that we're going to forget, and so we come here, we forget as is planned, and then some people get really lost in that forgetting. And the best analogy I can sort of use to describe it is, imagine you have been hired to be an actor in a play, and you get on stage, you do the play, but when the play finishes, you forget that that's not you. And the actor, you know, when an actor finishes their movie or finishes their play in the theater, they get off the stage, they take off their costume, and they go back to being themselves, right? But imagine if you got so lost in your character that you forgot who you really are. And I feel like that in itself, the way that people get lost in that, is one of the things that prevents people from then realizing who we really are. So when people come to Earth, they get so lost in the story, and sometimes negative things happen to us, and we take those things personally. And then when we get emotionally affected by those experiences, energetically, what happens is we hold traumas in our chakras or in our bodies, and those traumas can prevent us from sometimes reaching those levels of higher wisdom and knowledge, because we're so busy getting lost in the character that we've created here for ourselves.
Yeah, no, that sort of makes sense. Like, especially when you put in that analogy of being an actor and going away. Yeah, obviously going back to normal life. So that actually makes a bit of sense when you look at it that way. So that's a really good analogy. So we've got a question here already. Like, well, you said like when you once you got the contact there, you were actually having a conversation and such. Or they'll instructing you or something. What were they saying to sort of like guide you along in these sort of uh guides? I should say.
So I've connected with a wide variety. The very first group that I connected with, they were actually the Mayan elders, and they were giving me personal advice about my life situation, which was to do with the relationship that had ended and my life purpose and pathway. Very soon after that is when I connected with the Arcturians, and they came to me in that blue frequency, very typical Arcturian blue. And they said that they wanted me to share a series of sacred geometry codes with people. So in the coming days that followed, I received a series of 12 codes. And when I say codes, they're pictures. And with these images, they were encoded with healing and activation frequencies. So I drew all of these images down, and about a month after that, I felt really strongly guided to share them because that was the guidance I received. So I put on my very first event, and you have to keep in mind at this point, I had no facilitation experience, never learned how to be a meditation teacher, didn't even do Reiki, nothing like that. So this knowledge and wisdom that I was getting was coming directly from the Arcturians. And they said, here are these codes, share them with people. So I did. I trusted in the guidance. And when I look back on it now, I think, geez, like that was pretty bold, pretty brave. I didn't even know what the
Hmm.
codes were going to do. But I felt that they were really high vibrational. And the only piece of information I had was that these codes were designed to activate the 12-strand etheric DNA. So a little backstory on that is that we have two strands of DNA that everybody knows about, and that's what's in the physical reality. And then when you shift into the energy field of that, there are other light codes that can be activated within that. So these geometries that I received were designed to activate those etheric light codes that I didn't know at the time, but that can heal, that can help people awaken spiritually, open your third eye. A lot of things can come out of that. So shortly after having that initial experience, that first contact with Arcturians, and receiving these codes, I hosted my very first sacred geometry DNA activation event. And I had about 7 people show up to that event. And I had no experience facilitating, but I just followed the guidance. And 3 people in the room in their meditative states actually saw this blue Arcturian starship come in and be present with us. So when other people in the room started having these experiences, and I hadn't given them a lot of backstory about the Arcturians, or I hardly knew anything myself at that point. I just said, "Hey guys, we're going to meditate on these codes, and it's going to activate something within you." Luckily, people trusted me enough to come along for it. And then, yeah, 3 people had this experience, and I saw it too. So having that validation that it's not just me seeing something, that other people in the room through the meditation process are also experiencing this, gave me a lot of validation and confirmation that maybe there's something to this, and also answered the question of, am I going crazy? Because if it was just me, yeah, okay, you could question that. But when 3 or 4 people in a room start having a shared experience, then you have to start asking different questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, were these people that have had previous experiences as well coming to your segment, or is this something that like they're just open minded to and just sort of like, well, we'll see what happens, sort of thing?
I think at the time, I mean, I don't know the backstory of every single person who attended at the time that they attended, but I would say most of them were just open minded. Like I hadn't pitched this as like a contact type event or anything. If anything, it was more like a healing kind of event, you know. So come
Yeah,
receive healing or activation. So that's kind of how I positioned it. So I certainly wasn't expecting anyone in the room to connect with the Acturians in that way, and I don't know if any of them had previously connected or not. But I would say most likely probably not because or at least they hadn't told me if they had. So I
fair
think
enough.
it was just an open-mindedness in the group, and they were coming because they wanted to have some sort of experience. And then when it did turn into a shared contact experience, I mean, that was unexpected even for me.
Yeah, no, it would have been like, how was your sort of feeling? Like, everyone's obviously would have been pretty excited and pretty vibed up on the whole experience and encounter of like, some sort of connection with something that's non-human. Like, how was that like in the room? Like, was people pretty scared or, curious, or what was the sort of response after the whole thing?
I don't think people were scared. I mean, I was a bit surprised myself because I didn't know what to
Yeah,
expect at the time. But I think generally the people that were there were quite open minded. Whether or not they had contact, I don't know, but they were still spiritually open minded, and I think that was just the nature of the event that I was running, that it attracted spiritually open minded people, and so because of that. I think people were just like, oh, wow, that was a really cool experience. It wasn't like scary or anything. It was just, wow, that was really unique and interesting and different, you know?
yeah, absolutely. No, that's fair enough. Look, it's just interesting trying to get a like an idea of the whole room and the vibe because obviously something so unique, I should say. Like 'cause some people would say it's crazy thinking like people talking to beings from outer space in a spiritual wise. Like, how do you sort of confront that when it comes to people saying like it's a weird concept, like you're talking to people or weird beings. Like, what's your sort of feeling and response on that? Like, how do you sort of defend against all that?
I think I'm just too far in. I mean, it's like when people say, "Oh, this is all weird and stuff," I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like I just know what I know. So I have
Yeah.
I have an understanding that that might be, unique for them. Um, but I think I don't know. I mean, people are going to think what they're going to think regardless. It's for me, it's like, like Elon Musk is like, we're going to Mars, and people are going to think he's crazy and he's going to do it anyway. Like I'm the person that's going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So people are going to say what they're going to say, and that's up to them. But anyone who wants to experience this, I know that I can help them do that. So, there's always going to be skeptics. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who stand on the sidelines and don't believe it until it's actually done. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, cool. So I feel like I'm just too far in it and too far ahead and, to kind of take too much to those kinds of responses.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough too. Like, so how would you approach it? Okay, so go from a skeptic's point of view. I don't like to call them skeptics, but say like non-believers or something, like someone who's like curious but isn't really convinced on the whole concept of being able to contact spiritually. Like, how would you approach that sort of manner?
I would say then be your own scientist. I mean, at the end of the day, like I have a background in science, right? I used to be an engineer. I studied electrical engineering, and I have a master's in teaching as well. So I've come through a very academic pathway myself. And if you had told me at a younger age that all of this was true, I would have probably also said, "Well, give me the proof. How do I know this is real?" So I can totally understand that. I can empathize with that perspective. And I would say, well, in that case, instead of me convincing you, why don't you try it for yourself? Because experience is the best belief that you can have. If you do my activations, follow my processes, sit down and meditate, you will get results. And I know that. I know that from every, hundreds of thousands of clients that I've worked with. I know that to be true. So it's easy to stand on the sidelines. Again, I can give you an analogy. It's like imagine that somebody has never ridden a bike before, doesn't know what it feels like, and they're standing there staring at the bike, and they want you to explain every little thing about how it feels, and you just say to them, well, why don't you just get on the bike and pedal and try it, you know
Hmm.
and once they've tried it, they'll know what it's like to ride a bike.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so for anyone who's sort of on the fence, I would say just give it a go. I mean, there's so many modalities out there that help you to connect with ETs. I know Stephen Greer has CE5. I've got origin activation. I'm sure there's many other processes out there. If you head to my YouTube channel, which is just Eesha Patel, WSHAPATEL, if you type that on YouTube, you will find activations there that you can go and try for yourself. And if you try it for 30 days and then don't experience something, come back to me. But that generally never happens. So, if you do my practices every day for 30 days, you'll have your own experience. And there's your scientific experiment in the proof.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't ask for your money back.
Well, they're free. There's no money.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I was going to put that 30-day trial free thing, get your money back. No, that's all right. No, that's awesome. Like, I was going to bring that up too. Like, you get the CE5, and obviously, so it's along the same path as CE5.
Well, I have to say, I'm not overly familiar with Dr. Greer's work. I've just recently started seeing some of his stuff, but I know that we share some philosophies around the fact that humans can initiate contact and anyone can do it with the right tools. The processes that I use are ones that I have either learnt myself or have been given to me by the beings themselves. But yeah, I would say there's probably some similarities in terms of the fact that you're dealing with consciousness. That's what it really is. I mean, at the fundamental core of all of this, we're human beings, but our consciousness is so much more vast than that. So if you want to connect with beings that are non-human, you have to expand your consciousness. And I think, to be honest, a lot of people out there who are more focused on the nuts and bolts and they're just looking for the actual visual sightings, I think they're missing the mark a lot, because before I had any actual physical sightings, I had telepathic contact for about a year with nothing physical. The physical stuff came a lot later on down the track for me. Nowadays, I get physical sightings all the time. I can go out in my backyard and I can get little flashes and things that, are quite anomalous. But my initial contacts were purely telepathic. So I think for me, I was able to connect because I was open-minded and expanded my consciousness. And I think that's a really great starting point for people to understand that if you're just fixated on the physical only, you might miss actually some of the main key criteria to actually have this experience.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the hardest part, because a lot of people, like you're saying, they're very reliant on the physical evidence here, which I'm myself, I want the more physical evidence, which, don't get me wrong, I do believe there's a bigger picture here, like I was saying before, there's a spiritual aspect behind everything. But to me, I sort of feel like there needs to be more physical evidence for people to become more aware. It's like, we believe in Santa, but he's not real. But which the kids aren't listening. But, the belief system's there, but we still want that hard evidence to go, hey, look, Santa is real because he's there, but sort of thing. It's the same sort of concept.
Here's the thing, right? The physical evidence is there, and it's very much like, it's like saying, imagine you've got a car and you've only ever listened to one radio station the entire time you've had that car. Every time you get in the car, you listen to the same station. And let's just say it's by default set to rock music, right? And then somebody comes along and says, oh man, I was listening to this really cool, like, electronic pop song. And they're like, what? Like, what the F? Like I've only ever listened to rock music. And the other person's like, well, I figured out that I can change the dial on my radio and I can tune into a different channel. Right. So this other person's able to listen to maybe many channels, rock music and pop music and old school music and classical, and they've got this range of access, whereas the person who's got the radio stuck to one channel all the time is only going to get rock music. Right. So if the person who only listens to rock music says the other person's crazy, well, the other person's going to say, well, maybe you need to just dial into a different frequency. Right.
Yeah. No, look, that makes sense. And I guess it's like the hardest thing too. Like, I've tried, not really meditation, but it's like, it's sort of relaxing. And I find the hardest thing is to try and clear your mind and stay focused on what you're trying to achieve. But like, you get 30 seconds in, the next minute you're like thinking about something else, and you're like, oh, hang on, shit, I'm supposed to be, focusing on not thinking about anything and sort of just trying to meditate in that sort of regard. And I'm going to say, like, I'll speak for a lot of people. It's very difficult, and I guess it's going to take a lot of time and training and trying to mentally change your mind to go and focus on this.
Well, Anthony,
So obviously you got guides there, yeah.
Well, I actually have some really great news for you, Anthony, which is that you don't actually need to clear your mind. So everyone can relax.
That's all right then.
It's actually one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to making contact. They think that they need to have this amazing, clear, Buddha-like state in order to get that. And I can tell you that is 100% not true. In fact, that's what makes activations very different to meditation, because activation is based on frequency. What it does is it helps you dial into that particular frequency. So even if your mind isn't clear, what you do is you channel the thoughts of your mind into tuning into that frequency with intention. So I can tell you, my mind when I meditate is not 100% clear. Like, that's really hard. If anyone actually has figured out how to do that, tell me. I will learn from you. You know, but I have thoughts all the time, and I still manage to make contact, because it's about the energetic component, and that aspect of it can be learned very easily. Again, if you head to my YouTube channel, there's a number of activations there. You'll find that there's quite a big difference in that, because instead of trying to empty your mind, what you're doing is you're just redirecting all of that energy and all of those thoughts towards a purpose. And when you set the intention to connect and make contact, that's a really big piece of actually initiating it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. Yeah, so I'm hoping. Okay, I'll check it out later. I want to get a chance and have a try this. I'm hoping other people will try this as well, and get some feedback. Because that's obviously like it's something that people want to go and achieve. Because like you said, like I was saying before, people want some sort of hard evidence, and if this is a way to sort of get that sort of hard evidence, I guess people have to go and sacrifice their time and try and focus on achieving this. I hope it's easier than it sounds, but one way to find out.
It
So,
actually
was it?
is. My clients are very surprised at how simple it is. Like, I had someone who had never made galactic contact before. She just recently joined my group membership program. She did one activation, straight away connected with the galactic guide. So people think it takes, like, decades upon decades. It just doesn't. If you have the right tools and the right open mind and the right mindset, that's like 80% of the work done. Then you just sit yourself down, open up to the possibility that it's true, and then once you get guided into this space, it's actually very easy to connect.
Oh, it's good. I hope it's. I'm going to hold you to that.
Absolutely.
So, obviously, this has taken you around the world, obviously, and you're sort of trying to spread the word about your contact, your journey, and your guides, obviously. So, like, tell me how do you go about this, going from sorry, country to country, and like, what's the sort of response you're getting over these other countries? They're trying to introduce them into this sort of first contact.
Some places are definitely more open than others. I have done a few events in Melbourne, and I find they're pretty open-minded. Even here in Perth, actually, I find that people are fairly open to it. We get a lot of activity here, especially in the Perth Hills. I find that America, it just across the board, is very open-minded to all of this, and I think there's also a number of key players in the States right now who are really pushing for disclosure. So I think the topic has been quite at the forefront in the last couple of years there. So I think across the board, people are more and more waking up to the idea than the possibility that we're not alone in this universe. But again, I mean, it's hard to generalize across an entire country's population, because in a lot of these groups that I'm in, or spaces that I enter, you get the people that are very open-minded to it, you get the people who've had experiences, and then you get the people who just think it's downright absurd, everybody's crazy, and just can't
Mm.
understand a bar of it. So there's definitely a wide spectrum of responses in that. But I think across the board, what I've seen in the last decade is there's just so much more education available. There's more open mindedness. People are willing to try, when in the past they just thought it was like just woo woo weird stuff that you do in a basement. So I think we're
Cool.
getting somewhere. I definitely see that needle moving for sure.
No, that's good. Look, I hope it is sort of broadening out, because obviously, the biggest thing I'm trying to achieve myself here is, like, disclosure in a sense, and an acceptance to the whole topic, and a generalization to this. The truth of this is actually real.
Mm.
There's things out there we don't understand. We're trying to achieve the answers to these, but obviously the stigma is still attached to it. That's makes it very difficult, and that's why I like I'm glad you got in touch with me for yourself here to come and talk to me on here, because obviously there's a whole different spectrum behind the scenes of, like, physical evidence and whatever the governments are doing. So obviously I want to try and understand this side of the things, this side of the fence better than what they're trying to achieve behind the governments. Um, like, we are talking before, the physical evidence and such, and whatever the militaries that are trying to hide and whatnot. But something like this, it needs to be more broadened out. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Paul and Cyan, the Zeta connection at all.
It rings a bell, yeah.
So their claims are they talk to the Zetas, sort of similar to what you do. They'll have a contact or instructions of sorts. Like, how do you feel? Like, I'm not trying to go and put a war between you different connections and whatnot, but like, how do you go in relation with talking to other people who are saying that they've talking to other beings and such? Like, where does that sort of go along the lines?
Look, there are so many beings out there. Now, I just mentioned the Arcturians as one of the groups that I've connected with, but there are countless others. I also talk to Andromedans. I speak with the Lyrians. I speak with the Sirians. I speak with the Pleiadians. I've spoken with beings that even have non-human form. Like there's some beautiful whale and dolphin beings on Sirius. You've got the IC443 constellation. I could keep going. There's so many. So when people say they've had these experiences, I'm usually pretty open-minded to having a listen to what they have to say. And again, it's one of those things that the more experience you get, the more beings you can connect with. There are a lot of people out there who at the moment have only got maybe one or two connections. But once you activate that more deeply and you actually learn to extend your consciousness even further, I can connect with any being in the universe if I wanted to. Once you know how to actually use that mechanism of consciousness, you just focus your intention and that particular race or that particular group of beings will come and connect with you. So yeah, I'm very open-minded to when people say they connect with the Zeta beings. And I know there's at least 15 different races that I connect with myself. So I think there's probably thousands and thousands of races out there, and different people have connected with different ones depending on where their soul connections lie as well. And also maybe because that specific group of beings have chosen to make contact with that person for whatever reason.
Yeah, fair enough. So, like, obviously, talking to all these different sort of races and beings and such, like, what is like? Have they spoken to you, like, on their sort of agenda? Like, what's their whole end goal here, or what are they trying to achieve here? If that makes sense.
Different beings definitely have different agendas. I think it's naive to say that it's all love and light and everything's amazing. There are some beings who, and some races who are very, very much here to help us. So Arcturians, Pleiadians, Lyrians, Sirians, Andromedans, they're examples of beings that are really here to support us. There are some beings who more want to make contact with us for experimentation purposes. The reptilians definitely have a bit of a bad rap, but again, among reptilians, there are ones who are a little bit more evolved as well. Same likewise with the greys. But typically reptilians and greys and manted beings are often responsible for a lot of abduction scenarios. So their agenda is not so much to help us evolve, but rather for their own sort of purposes. And you have to understand that there's a spectrum to consciousness in this. So just like on Earth, we have some people on Earth who are very, very kind-hearted, beautiful, amazing souls. And then there are some people on Earth who instigate war and kill people. And so even across all humans, you can't say all humans are good or all humans are bad. So the same kind of applies with races, but there are some races that as a whole are more evolved. Like the Arcturians are very highly evolved as a race. They have actually achieved planetary level peace. Pleiadians, same deal. So there are some races out there that are at a higher level of evolution than us who have managed to eradicate disease. They have better technologies and they have a level of peace and unification amongst themselves. And there are some races that are still working that out like us. So different races and different beings can have very different and even conflicting agendas at times.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Obviously, yeah, like you're saying, like, obviously humans are, well, yeah, good spirits and bad spirits, malevolent people and such and whatnot. But I do have a question here from Mick. He's asking, um, there are good connections out there, but aren't you concerned you might open yourself up to one that might not be good or positive?
That's a really great question. It's one of the most frequently asked questions I get from my clients as well. And something that I teach every single client who works with me is how to maintain discernment. Now, I know this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, new agey, whatever, but the truth is that everything works in frequency. And the frequency that you put out is the frequency that you get back. And I also want to really clarify this before I go any further. If you've made contact with a negative entity, please don't take it as that you are wrong or bad. It is absolutely not true. What it is that people are still refining their ability to connect. And the clearer you get in that connection and the ability to connect, the more discerning you can be in those connections. Now, one of the easiest ways to have that discernment is to firstly always start before you connect with anything outside of yourself is always connect with your own higher self first. That's number one. When you connect with your own higher self and you deepen that connection, from there, you are much more likely to be able to discern and feel the energy of other beings that might be trying to connect with you. So once you have that higher self connection, what I highly recommend is then for people to do heart opening exercises. For example, on my YouTube, there is a heart chakra activation that would be really great for this. Once you open your heart energy, then you can set the intention to connect with benevolent beings only. And if any moment you are unsure of the agenda or the frequency of that being, you pause and then you send love, literally just visualizing or feeling white light or feeling love in your heart, radiate that out from your heart to theirs. And it is a universal law that any being that is approaching you with high loving intention will be able to approach that energy. And if a being is not coming to you with positive intention, if you keep sending love to them, do it 3 times, they will either not come any closer or they will walk away. So that is an experience I've had many times traveling the multiverse, and I've connected with all sorts of beings, and that knowledge gives me trust in myself to know that whatever I'm doing, whoever I'm connecting with, I can always discern the frequency. And that love vibration is so strong that when you send that energy out, you radiate that out from the heart, any being that is not of that vibration simply cannot enter your field. And that is what I use every time when traversing these multiverse spaces.
Yeah, okay, that sounds really complex, but obviously, the basics are just stay away from malevolent entities, from your negative vibrations. I guess is that pretty much it?
Well, I think well, in the context of the question that was asked, it's what if you don't know if they're good or bad? So
Yeah.
first you have to have the discernment. Obviously, yes, stay away from the bad guys. I mean, just to put it in really
Mm.
simple black and white terms, it's more complex than that. But if you were going to put it into really black and white terms, yeah, invite in the good guys, stay away from the bad guys. But if you don't know which is which, this is what you do, right? You have to be able to feel their energy and their intention. And this is where it really comes down to how open is your heart energy. How it's like if you meet a person, you can often get like a bit of a gut feeling like, oh yeah, I can trust this person, versus, oh, that feels a little bit off. That gets so much more amplified in those realms. You have to be willing to trust that. Here on earth, if you get like a not so great vibe with someone, maybe you might not have a good experience or whatever, and you'll learn something from it. In those realms, if you just get the tiniest little bit of doubt, you're much better off walking away than putting yourself in a situation where you're making contacts with beings that maybe don't have the best energy. In saying that though, most of the beings that I connect with, because it's human initiated contact, right? I'm the one initiating the contact. I've set the intention to connect with loving beings. So most of the time, that's who I connect with.
Yeah. So what if you actually get drawn into a bit of a false connection? Like, they could all come forward going, "Oh yeah, look, no, we're all good here. We're nice people or nice beings and such." And next minute you're going to be dragged into a really sort of malevolent sort of connection. Like, what
Yeah, I
is
have
that
had that
something you've
happen
experienced
before.
before?
Yeah, I have. And that's why I teach discernment as first and foremost number one tool to all clients that work with me. When you can strengthen your energy field, one of the things is your emotions in the astral realm actually play a really big role in the way that things play out. And when you have an energy of fear, that actually ripples out and then is more likely to attract like entities that essentially feed off fear, right? Um, there are theories out there that sort of go into this idea that human harvesting and things like that, and this is kind of where it comes from. So here on earth, we're 3D beings, we eat food, right? So we will physically take an apple or a piece of food, whatever, we will eat it with our mouth. Now in the fourth dimensional astral realm, emotions can actually be a form of food for certain beings. So if you're vibrating at the energy of anger or fear, then that's likely to attract beings who are drawn to feed on those energies. Whereas if you consciously set your intention to feel love, compassion, gratitude, vibrations of high energy, then you're more likely to connect with beings of high energy. So if you are going to set out to initiate contact, I highly recommend before you start, sit down and just do a little gratitude practice in your heart, radiate that energy so that you're more likely to connect with beings that are of that frequency that you're setting out to connect with.
Yeah, so basically don't start trying to contact when you've had a bad day at work.
It's
To a
not even
degree.
that. I've really, people get really, if you've had a bad day at work, you're still okay. Like, have some loving kindness to yourself. Because sometimes when I have these conversations, people get scared. They're like, oh, if I've got the tiniest little bad vibration, maybe some horrible entity is going to come to me. And all I say is just release the fear around that. Trust in yourself. Trust in your own heart. Trust in your capabilities. We're a lot more powerful than we think we are. Going into it with a positive intention and positive vibration. And also it helps to have some tools as well. It helps to know what to do in those situations. So if you did meet someone, a being that maybe said they were good but maybe weren't, what do you do about that? Well, again, and this is what happened to me. So I had a reptilian being pretend to be Archangel Michael, right? So this happened very early on in my days, and looked like Archangel Michael, had the blue color, everything. So almost identical, wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. But at that point in my journey, I was being very discerning with all energy. So anytime an energy came up to me, if I didn't feel straight away who they were, then I would just get a little bit suspicious, like, wonder what's going on. Now, I know when I connect with Archangel Michael in those realms, that he will come up and put his hand on my heart. So I feel his loving energy. I actually feel that within my body. Now, this being who was supposedly Archangel Michael actually stood about 3 feet away from me. This was happening in a meditative state. So I could see him in the inner realms. He's standing about 3 feet away. Wouldn't come any closer. Straight away, alarm bells are going off in my head. What is this? Who is this? What's going on? But it's okay. I have the tools. Now, so instead of going into fear or going, oh, I must be in a negative state or self-blaming and none of that. No, it's okay. This being has approached me. I am powerful enough to know that I have the tools within me to discern this. So I take a deep breath, I pause, I strengthen my heart energy by visualizing my inner heart star, which is a white light in your heart chakra. Radiate that light outwards. And then this is what I did. I radiated that light from my heart to his. And then I said, who are you? I got no response. I said, who are you? No response. Third time, reveal yourself. There's some universal law about threes. Third time, shape shifted. Archangel Michael was gone. Reptilian was there, and he just bolted off. So knowing that there are tools that can help you with this, keep you very safe. So for anyone who's listening to this, I really, I don't want you to think, oh, I've had a bad day and so I can't connect. No, please connect. These beings are wanting to connect with us, but be intentional in your connection. If you're going to connect, set the space. Do a ritual if you need to, if that's what helps you. Light a candle, put on some incense, get your space ready so that your frequency, when you do set out on that connection, is coming from a loving place. And a lot of the times, if I have had a bad day, I will call upon them and say, guys, help me out here. I'm having a shitty day. Please help heal me, or, something like that, because they're very, very compassionate. The beings that I've connected with, Acturians, are very compassionate. They will heal you. The archangels are very compassionate. Pleiadians are so, so loving and wise. If I've ever got myself to a point where I'm like, oh, I don't know what's happening, or what's my next step, or I feel lost or whatever, I do actually reach out to them, but I'm still coming from a loving place. So I don't want that to deter people from connecting, because they are here to help us. They're here to support us, and they're available for us at any time you want to ask. Just reach out, set your intention, breathe into your heart. And with that loving intention, just say, please make yourself available, and they will come to you.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So, like, what about obviously it's going from a spiritual side of things. Like, why is there? Like, do you know a reason why they won't sort of come to us physically in that sort of nature? Like, why does it have to always be through a spiritual way?
Well, firstly, they do. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, originally when I first started out, it was telepathic, but I've had many, many physical contacts since then as well. One of the ways they frequently show up is through photographs for me. So I have copious amounts of photos of various orbs, energies, craft, things like that, but also physical sightings. And one of the reasons why, and this is a question I get asked all the time, if they're there, why don't the starships just land themselves on the ground? And one of the biggest reasons for that is that we as a human race are not evolved enough in our consciousness to be able to handle that. And because frequency plays such a big role in how things play out collectively, if starships started landing down from the sky right now, chances are that majority of the population would actually go into fear, and it could initiate some sort of interplanetary war, or it would just cause a lot of chaos, and they don't want that. They actually want a very peaceful disclosure, a very peaceful contact. So that's why they've chosen in the last few decades to make contact with individuals who are ready and open to it instead of coming down in a mass way. That's not to say it won't happen, though, because as our human consciousness is evolving and more people are waking up, we're about to reach a critical mass where that mass open contact is actually going to become very, very available. And we're not too far off that point.
Yeah. So what? Okay, you're saying that they're choosing certain people around the planet that go and sort of like bring forward some sort of soft disclosure or something. So why are they picking sort of random people who are sort of like aren't really in a high regard in society? Like why not like the president or kings and queens or someone in that sort of nature to like go, hey, look, we're going to contact you, but for whatever reasons, we need to contact you this way instead of coming out in physical form.
Well, firstly, I suspect some of the presidents have actually had contact. So, and there
Yeah.
are a couple of them that have spoken about this if you go into the history of ufology. So that definitely has happened from what I've heard. Now, in terms of why they don't just show themselves to all the politicians right now, the thing is it's a little bit more complex than that, right? This is where diplomacy comes into it, and also they have to be very mindful of human free will. Now, one of the things with planet Earth is that we have free will, and a lot of the contact is done through our choosing. So they don't pick people based on their position or their role, because firstly, they don't care about that. Secondly, what they're looking for is either that person has a soul agreement to have that contact, or they've consciously and willingly chosen. In my instance, I'll say it's probably a combination of both, but the contact for me actually happened because I put it out there and said, hey, I'm ready for this. So I actually consciously and willingly chose to initiate that, and that's when a lot of this started opening up for me. So that's where the concept of CE5 or human initiated contact really comes into play, in that we get a choice. Now, if the queen or the king now or the politicians decided to actively make contact, they probably would make themselves known to them. The question is, are they ready for that? And maybe they are, maybe they're not. So that I don't know.
Yeah, so the thing that sort of frustrates me in the whole concept of this contact, or like this day and age, is like they've been around for what, thousands of years, if not longer. Like, why didn't they make some sort of contact then? Why not, come throughout the centuries where we were sort of first starting out as humanity, and be disclosed to us, and it would have been like the norm. Like we would have been adapted to it hundreds of years ago, basically, and we would know no different today.
Well, they actually have. Again, I mean, if you go back into the history, there are ancient, like very old sort of tribal races where the lineage of the knowledge has been passed down generation after
Mm.
generation. And star beings are in all of them. I mean, here in Australia, indigenous culture, there are pictures inside caves with UFOs. Like, so,
Yeah.
I think there was a point in time where it was the norm.
Yeah, it was like, where did it come into that point there where they're just going like, when did you go and hide from humanity now? What part of that sort of like, just disappeared? Where did it go wrong?
Well, you got to understand the history of Earth, and when I say history, I'm talking about the untold history of Earth. I'm not talking about what you find in the history books. I'm talking about the shift in consciousness that has happened over tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. This is going back to the time of Atlantis, right, and Lemuria, which was pre-Atlantis as well. So our planet has gone through a descension process. Now, what I mean by that is, planets are shifting in vibration, and this happens all the time. Planets lift in vibration, they decline in vibration. There are reasons why this happens. One of the things that happened back in Atlantean times was that the use of technology is what created the fall of the Atlantean Empire. And when the technologies essentially they got to a point where they were destructive, that's when the big flood happened, and a lot of civilization was actually wiped out as a result of that. So So going back to some of the, this untold ancient history, there was a time where there was full contact with these beings, and as the planet has lowered in vibration, there's been a deeper level of forgetting. And when the consciousness isn't there to meet it, again, we go back to this analogy of we're like the car stuck in one frequency. It's not that they're not there, it's just we're not tuning into them. Anyone who changes their frequency can tune into them, because the starships are all around us. They're here on the planet, they're in the atmosphere like all the time. You just have to have that level of awareness, because what's happening right now is just, it's a mismatch of frequency. So when you can dial into it, you are able to see and perceive these starships through the shifting of our consciousness.
Yeah. So like the thing I'm more trying to get at is like, if there, as you say, I know like the history of the world has been, we've had multiple resets and such like that. It could have very well been ancient civilizations prior to our civilization that sort of inhabited the earth and evolved and adapted. Like depends on which sort of wormhole you want to go down. But my argument more is like, obviously they've been around for so long. Why is it everything just going to be through the military for sightings and such for that to be disclosed instead of them having their, just landing every day, which would have been just normal for us if they just did smack bang on our days, like, medieval days or even sooner. It could have been a different outcome if they weren't just hiding all the time. And like we would be discussing this today because we would already know the truth. But
Yeah.
like why did it have to become a big secret to go and hide away? That's my sort of big argument.
Well, the thing is, they're
Question.
not hiding. It's just that we're not accessing them. It really comes down to our human evolution. They're not hiding from us. They're so available to anyone who wants to connect. It's just that we have lost the ability to tune into that frequency. I mean, we only use 10% of our minds. Like, what happens if we actually activated all of that capacity? If we expanded our consciousness, our brain so much that we're able to fully understand everything in the universe. I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot to consider. So then they're not the ones hiding from us. The thing is that planet Earth is here for us to have the human experience, and there's a level of, think about it like this, like if the parent takes the child to a park and lets them play in the playground, they might be like a few meters away, and maybe the kid can't always see the parent, but the parent's always watching them. And when the kid is lost in their play and they're making their sandcastles or playing on the swing, they might not be aware of the parent watching them, but the parent's still watching them, right?
Yeah.
That's it's a good enough analogy for the moment, in that
Yeah.
think about them like kind of like the parents who are there in the background. It's just we don't have awareness of that, right?
Yeah.
It's because our consciousness, our focus is not there right now, so we're not seeing them. It's not like they're hiding from us. And if you were a child in the playground and say it's your first day at kindy and suddenly you couldn't see your mum, you probably would freak out and cry like, oh, where's my mom? But actually mum's right there.
Hmm.
So we need to elevate our consciousness to be able to connect. And it's not to say they're not already connecting with us, because there have been moments where craft have landed. Craft has even crashed. If you go look into, again, ufology, there are many instances where craft have actually
Hmm.
shown up. But you also have to understand that the process of disclosure, it needs to be done in a very peaceful and calm way that humans can actually digest, because any other way would create either war or mass level trauma, and that is just not ideal. There's a level of care that is taken upon this, and I have asked this question to the Intergalactic Federation many times. I'm like, guys, why don't you just land your spaceships? Why don't you just do this or do that? Because they absolutely could if they wanted to, but they've shown me so clearly that look at what would happen to humanity if that's how it played out. And the reality is they'd get shot at, like
Yeah.
especially if it was in America and everybody's got a gun, they'd get shot at. Like that's just the reality of how it would go down. So it's not that they're hiding for us. They are gently encouraging and nurturing, and they're making these contacts, and in a way they're kind of also testing us to see where we're at, because when we do get to the point where we can rejoin with the federation of all the different galactic races that are out there, they need to make sure that we're at a level that we can harmoniously interact with them as well. It's kind of like, they have so many advanced technologies and things in place that It's like you wouldn't give a machete to a toddler, right? Like you want to make
Yeah.
sure that the person can handle it. And so if we haven't yet as a civilization eradicated war, if we're not at a level of peace as a human race, they're going to be cautious. They're going to be cautious with us. So that there's a level of that playing into it as well. And then what's happening is they're here to support and guide, and you know everyone wants the same thing. Like they want nothing more than to welcome us back into contact with everyone. But it's just there's a few things that need to happen, and there's a process by which this needs to happen so that it happens peacefully and smoothly. And that's why they're not just landing their ships. The process is in place. It's already happening. Everything is exactly perfectly aligned. The timelines are already aligned to this. It's guaranteed to happen. I expect to see this in my lifetime. So it's just following the step-by-step protocols, procedures to make sure that when it does happen, it happens in the best way possible. That is peaceful, calm, not traumatizing, and doesn't create interplanetary war.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough too. I should probably correct myself more. It's more the government's hiding, not so much them. You know?
The government has its own agenda, and you know the government is a really large it's a very broad term.
Yeah.
After speaking with ufologists, I've learned to not just generalize the government for all things. Even the Australian government versus the US government versus the Chinese and the Russian governments have differing opinions on some of this stuff. Now some sectors of certain governments have chosen to keep things quite hidden. Some of it is for the fact that they're just scared. They don't know how to deal with this, and other aspects of it are for personal gain. Like for example, if a craft has landed, like for example, Roswell or many other incidents out there, if a craft has actually landed, they want to be the first to get their hands on the technology, and they don't want civilians to know about it straight away. So there are some of those military type agendas coming in as well, reverse engineering, things like that. I think David Grush came out quite recently with some of those allegations of reverse engineering and also live beings that have been operated on. And through a lot of my research on the First Contact podcast, I have come across some very similar things myself as well.
Well, that's amazing. I'll go and check that out too. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on this whole, the government disclosure side of things? Like, obviously, you got your own sort of disclosure you're trying to bring forward as well. You even said that you talked to world leaders or politicians of sorts. Can you touch on that one quickly?
I don't speak with politicians. I am currently in contact with certain groups and alliances that are working diplomatically with some of those leaders in those spaces, but I personally haven't spoken to any politicians myself. I hope to. That is a dream.
Yep.
I'm hoping to get to the UN later this year and perhaps create some conversations there, but let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's the first thing you really have to understand. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what someone's role is; they're all just people, right? Everybody's a person. So it's just about making connections and getting the word out there. When it comes to an official level of disclosure, look, I'm all for supporting a government level and military level disclosure. At the same time, though, I'm a very strong believer in any civilian, any regular human being can initiate contact right here, right now, today. So instead of waiting around for some official announcement to happen, you can initiate your own first contact by utilizing some of the tools. Like, for example, I have my 5D Empire membership that teaches you how to do that. I've also got the activations on my YouTube channel. I've got my First Contact podcast. There's a lot available in there for you to learn how to make contact yourself. So my only thing with that is don't wait or rely on that to happen. Take it into your own hands. We are very empowered. The skies are not classified, famous quote by Avi Loeb, right? Look up to the skies, open your heart, make your own contact. And when each person takes it upon themselves to explore this, to be your own scientist, your own experiencer, I think contact is going to happen a lot faster that way. And perhaps even at some point, enough people, enough individual humans on this planet will have enough contact that the government will just be like, oh yeah, that's right, we knew all along. Whoop-de frickin' do, And it won't even be a big deal because by that point, everybody already knows, right?
Yeah, well, here's hoping.
That's it.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the whole disclosure thing that they're doing with, David Grush coming forward and that? I think you had another guy there not long after him. I can't remember his name though. But yeah, what's your whole thoughts on the whole process they're going through at the moment?
What my galactic contacts have told me is that it's all part of a bigger picture. They said keep trusting in the bigger picture. This disclosure is happening on all fronts. So people like myself are doing it with members of the public. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, leaders in the sense of like community leaders. They're the people that I'm helping right now. Then you've got people like David Grush and Bob Lazar and Luis Elizondo and many other people like that are doing it in their way. I think it's getting to a point where disclosure is happening on so many fronts that it can't be ignored. Yes, it's happening at a military level. It's happening at a governmental level with certain press conferences. It's happening through whistleblowers. It's happening through people like Ross Coulthart here in Australia, who has written his book In Plain Sight. It's happening through researchers and experiences like myself with podcasts, through movies. So I just think, it's being tackled on so many different avenues now that the combination of all of that is shifting the needle. And I see that. I mean, like these days I go to a party and talking about UFOs is just a topic that comes up. 10 years ago, I never went to a party, met a stranger and talked about UFOs. These days I go to a bar and suddenly people are talking about it. So the needle is moving. And I think it takes all of these fronts happening at once for that real impact to start coming forward and making things happen.
Yeah, no, look, it's really good, and I hope it does going to come to that point, like where people are going to be talking openly about it, and that's one of my biggest achievements. Like trying to, like I was saying before, remove the stigma of the whole thing. There, and people are going to be starting talking about this more. People are having these experiences everywhere around the world, and they're still too afraid to go and even talk about it or even approach to like even bring the topic up. Like especially abductees, like they got the fear of their own encounter, like whether like they're still questioning their mentality and such, or if it's that traumatic for them that they have no idea even how to approach it or to even talk to someone about it. And that's where I'm sort of hoping this whole disclosure for worldwide, and like you yourself and myself, they're working to try and talk about this openly. Like I'm hoping it's going to achieve that point there, but it's just it's frustrating, like just how much is still getting held back and behind the the government side of things. um but so like another thing is like when it comes to disclosure as well, like it comes to the religious aspect. Like
Yeah.
where does that go with you on this sort of whole thing? Like, is this do you think it's like a religious thing that's with these beings? Like, are they supposed to be demons and angels? I'm sure you've been asked this quite a few times.
Yeah, I do come across this quite a lot. And it's you know when certain countries were being colonized, there were people who said that the First Nations people are demons because they're black in color and they're not like us, and so those allegations have been thrown around before. And so I look at that and I kind of go, okay, I can understand where that mentality comes from. We've had it as humans, but it's really time to ditch that. These ETs are just, they're like us. They're it's consciousness in form. How can we call that demonic? It's like we have animals here, we've got humans here, and then there are other beings, life forms that are conscious like us, and it's up to us to embrace that and accept that. At the moment it's hard enough embracing animals. I think well, certainly, veganism is doing a lot to bring this idea that humans have consciousness as well, but it goes even beyond that. And there are intelligent beings out there who have so much to offer us in terms of connection and wisdom, and the last thing you want to do is be putting them in the religious bucket, because there's nothing to do with religion. First of all, religion is about belief. This is just, to me, this is science. These beings exist, they are here, you can contact them, there's enough evidence out there, and it's really just about opening our hearts to embrace that, because calling them demons is like calling a black person demon. It's ridiculous. We know that now, but let's evolve ourselves. Let's be more inclusive. Let's be more diverse in our thinking to recognize that all life forms in this galaxy, this multiverse, deserve respect the same way that we respect other human beings.
Yeah, look, that's probably what's like one of the worst human traits, isn't it? Like when something is different to how we are, we treat it very differently, and it's a horrible way to think. There's
It's
no reason
good.
for it. It's just the way that we grew up, and it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we see it even just I mean, like, racism still exists on the planet, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a thing. Like, and I know there's a lot being done to change that, and there's definitely some positive movements in that direction as well. I just, I really wish for the day that we can not only embrace all humans on this planet, but also embrace all animals, embrace all forms of consciousness and interplanetary beings and galactic consciousnesses and everything, because anything that has consciousness is worth something. It's not just humans.
No, that's right. So I've got a couple of questions here. I'll just quickly go through. I might have missed one up top here. Now, all right. So I got one here from Jane. She's asking like, which of these beings or something like did they create the human race?
Well, it's a complex question, and again, it is one that I get frequently asked. I don't want to go so far as to say that they created us, but they definitely assisted in the seeding of the human race. If you understand that we are more than just a physical body, we are souls, and that soul has multiple experiences across multiple different planets. Now, to really understand this, one of the things you need to understand is that the body is of the earth, but the soul is cosmic. So so when earth first became a place that there was going to be life on, yes, there were ETs that were involved in the seeding of this race here, but there's also a very earthly element to the human race that no other star being has, and that is our very specific genetics and DNA. So it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B. I hope I've managed to answer that appropriately.
No, that's all good. No, like, it's a very like you said, a very complex and very difficult sort of answer. Like it depends on your belief systems. We even go, if God created the humans and whatnot, or it could have been a
Well,
sign
that's
of
it. And
evolution.
there is a very defined component. Like at the end of the day, I think all life form is created from this God, whatever sense you want to call it, universe, whatever people want to say about it. But that's where all of creation originates. But then there are forms of assistance. Again, best way to describe it is like here on the planet, there are people here who breed animals. Like, for example, you get dog breeders, right? So they might get a female dog and a male dog and intentionally breed that dog, right? But did the humans create that dog, or did they just assist in the creation of that? So I see it more as like I believe there was some level of assistance to us in actually seeding this race on the planet. But I think, yeah, all creation comes from there's a something like a force that is unknown, that is so vast, that is actually responsible for the actual creation itself.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's like we get designer dogs, like you were saying, changing breeds and such, and like how we've sort of evolved them over the years from wolves, and like how many species of dogs is there now? It's it's like how do they even get to that point with
Yeah.
such an ancient? I don't know. Like, well, I don't know how long have these dogs been around now. Like since go a couple hundred years now. These different breeds of dogs, and like how did they even manage to evolve these dogs into like little chihuahuas to German shepherds and Rottweilers and pugs and stuff? Like it's like how? But was
Yeah,
there
there's
some
so
sort of
many
special
different
ingenuity?
crossbreeds, and you get these days, those mini poodles, those little tiny ones that everybody's obsessed with.
Yeah,
And again, it's like yes, humans helped to create that breed, but it's not like a human went in there and surgically put all the particles together to make that happen.
yeah,
There was
but
an
yeah, I
organic
suppose.
element to that as well.
Yeah, so I've got another question here. Some of them going through there quickly. There's one. Sorry, I'm just going through a mixed comment here. Though. There's one answer there, Anthony. Why would they bother coming out to say when? Sorry, coming out to. Hang on, sorry, Mick, I'm reading that a bit wrong. Why would they bother coming out to say when we can't even accept another color or accent? Basically, yeah. So that would be like a good point. Like, yeah, they're obviously not going to come forward if we can't, live in civilization in harmony and just because of different races and such, they're not going to come forward. Which is yeah, fair enough.
But also, they are coming forward just to select individuals at this moment in time, and anyone who wants to make contact can make contact. They're not coming forward in a mass way, and there's a reason for that. But there has to be a really, I guess, careful way that this happens, that's very mindful of humanity's reaction to this as well. And also there's the element of free will that comes into this, because you know we still, as a human race, have free will, and it's our choice, to connect. So the ideal pathway is people realize of their own accord, and they come to this understanding of these beings, and then they willingly choose for that contact to happen rather than it being imposed on us.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So I just want to go touch back on the religious side of things too. Like, like I've always seen, like, I'm not very fond of religion at all. Because, like, we were saying, like, it's a belief system and such. Now, regardless of people's opinions and views on religion and whatnot, my biggest thing is, like, when someone's in trouble, they rely on God to come and save them and whatnot. And, one of the comments here is like, why do these beings flee in the name of God or Jesus or something like that? Like, what's your thoughts on that? Like, if it's not such a strong religious aspect behind these beings, why does it seem like, people seem to be able to go and use his name in vain and, send these demons away or something like that?
Well, first of all, I think there's a really big difference between demons and ETs. I think there are definitely entities out there that could be considered demonic. And in those instances, yes, you would call upon Christ. I mean, I'll just share with you an experience. So, when I was a teenager, I used to experience a lot of psychic attack, and it happened through the form of dreams or night terrors. And when I used to have these really, really vivid nightmares, I would see these really demonic type entities and like scary things, like wolves with red eyes and stuff like that. And that was horrifying, like really scary, especially as a teenager. And in those instances, I would call upon Christ, I would say the Lord's Prayer, and those beings would go away. So I absolutely understand the sentiment behind this. But these other beings that I'm talking about are not like that. So let's not lump them all into the same category. There's a lot of energies out there. There's a lot of different beings out there. Just because it's unknown to us doesn't automatically make it demonic. It just means that it's unknown to us. So like a lot of the beings I connect with, they actually come through a love frequency, and when I'm connecting with them, I call upon divine source God, I call upon Christ, and those beings make themselves known to me. So those beings, like for example Arcturians, Pleiadians, Andromedans, a lot of them will not shy away at the word of God. They will actually be embraced by source energy because they are created by the same energy. Like I believe God created them and created us. So I don't think any of us are demonic in that instance.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just having a lot of issues with my headset now. For some reason, the audio is starting to go real haywire here. So I don't know if you want to call it a government interference, maybe, or some sort of someone doesn't want the truth coming out. I'm getting this a lot happening at the moment. It's an absolute pain in the ass. I'm gonna see if I can try and get back in the other headset and see if it wants to work this time. I did have another question up top here. Where'd it go? Right. So now we were talking about beings like who are being a bit malevolent and such, and obviously everyone has their bit of own agendas and such. Now, what are your thoughts when it comes to, like, when they're abducting humans and such? Like, what's your thoughts on the whole concept behind these reasons of these abductions?
Look, I have spoken to some people that have had these experiences, and I do feel deeply, if somebody has had an experience where they've been violated by a non-human entity, I can totally understand there would be a lot of fear and trauma around that. And as I said, there are so many different beings out there in the multiverse, and some of them do want to experiment on humans, and they're not respectful, the way that we would expect. But again, it's the same as like it's like, there are some humans on this planet that do really horrible things to people too. So you have to be a little bit open-minded in that sense, and it's very difficult to lump all experiences into one specific reasoning or one specific category, because like, I mean, let's go really dark for a second. All right, let's just say somebody is a serial killer. Well, what's their motivation for doing that? I don't know, but it might not be the same as someone else. And what about somebody who initiates war on another country? What's their reasoning for doing that? Like, everybody's got their own personal agendas, and so please don't put that as a label on the whole race. It's like saying all Russians are bad because Putin declared war. Like, that's just not true. There are some really beautiful Russians out there, and I don't want to have a debate on which side of the fence you're on with Russia versus Ukraine. But at the end of the day, Putin declared war, and that is not a reflection on any Ukrainian or any Russian person. It's just that was a decision that was made by one person, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, which is fine. That's fair enough to, like, obviously, yeah, there's some deeper agendas and, like, some I'm sure you've heard the different theories there where, like, they're doing, like, hybrid crossbreeds and such like that. They're, you know, what's another one now? I've lost myself now. But I think the biggest one here is, like, they're trying to interbreed and make some sort of hybrids because they're, like, lost civilizations of their own species and such like that. It depends on where you want to go with it. But
Mm.
either way, like, the part of me that's, like, you even mentioned it before too, like, there's a bit of a agreement along the line there. Like, I'm sure I'll fix my camera up here so I'm not um, so, like, I'm sure you would have heard, like, a family contract, but I call it a bit of a blood contract where someone along the lines has agreed to go and look, we've agreed you can come and abduct our family line because there's some sort of, interest with our DNA. There's something that might be of interest to you, so we've made an agreement or some sort of pact. Obviously, what's your thoughts along those lines? Like, what is there some sort of agreement in your family history that you're aware of, or is it something that you've sort of more come across through your research?
I'm very clear on what my personal agreements are. When it comes to other people's agreements, again, there could be so much variation in that. I do think there are some people who, before coming to Earth, agreed to have these experiences, and then I also believe that some are just downright violations, and they do it in a very sneaky way. Like, one of the stories I heard once was somebody I was chatting with, and they had an abduction experience, and basically the being was appeared as a very seductive feminine form, and then they said that in order to save our race, we need your human DNA, and basically coerced him into a sexual experience. And I just looked at that and went, do you realize that that's the way they've tricked you into getting a sample, because there's now universal laws in place that the person has to consent, and so they've gained his consent, but they've gained it through really shady means, right? Because no, they don't need that sample to save their race. Like, they'll say whatever they need to say to have that experience, and then just the person who chose to have that sexual encounter experience via abduction did it willingly, thinking that they were helping in the human race and the other race or whatever. But really, what they did was they consented to a contractual agreement where their DNA could be used for whatever purpose the beings wanted to use it for, whether it was experimentation, hybrids, or whatever. So there's definitely some shady stuff going on out there as well.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. That's probably my biggest fear there. This whole when it comes to abductions and such, is like obviously like I was saying before, like people have sort of made some agreement there, but there's other times where people haven't, and they just come and take you willy nilly, and that's the part that scares me the most of this whole thing. Of the reality of this whole UFO concept is that they're going to take you willy nilly wherever you are, whoever you are. If there's something about you that they've got an interest in, they're going to do it regardless of your agreement or not.
Well, the thing is, they do have to get consent if there's no agreement in place, but they will use shady means to do that. Let me put another analogy that makes sense here. So, have you ever been to Mexico, Anthony?
No.
Neither have I, but I've heard some things about Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I just say, you know what, yes, there's some shady people in Mexico. I'm never going to go to Mexico. I mean, that's a choice that I can make. I can just not go to Mexico, right?
Yep.
But chances are, if I go to Mexico, I might meet some really nice people there too. And yes, there's some like mafia mobs and whatever stuff going on too. But you kind of just avoid those people. If you don't go into the shady areas of town, you avoid those streets. You can also have a really great time in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. People get really scared because they go, oh, well, there's this handful of bad experiences. But it's the same as like Like, just because there was a shooting in Texas doesn't mean I'm never going to visit America. I'm still going to go to America, right?
Yeah.
But that was one experience, one negative experience, and then there's so many other vast experiences there as well. So I think it is really important to just take a very balanced approach. And yes, there are some of these negative experiences that have happened, and I don't want to discount that for the people that have experienced that. But also, let's not discount disclosure or connection altogether for the sake of those few experiences. Because I've had very positive experiences connecting with these beings as well. And yes, I've heard of negative ones as well. And that's also just life here on Earth too. It's exactly the same, right?
Yeah. It's like if you read like a product that you're interested in, there, all you're going to see is the negative reviews. You very
Yeah,
rarely see a
exactly.
positive
Yeah,
review.
yeah.
So that's where it makes it hard, especially on this topic. Like I was saying, like, it is a scary concept behind this whole thing, but that's what sort of ruins this whole concept of the reality that if these alien races do come to visit, they're just going to go and abduct everyone and just experiment on them, and it creates that big stigma and it ruins it
Let
for
me
everyone.
tell you right now, if they wanted to abduct everyone or kill everyone or take over the planet, they absolutely would have done that by now. And
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest reasons why I know that's not true. Because
yeah.
their technology is so much more advanced that if they wanted to do that, they would have done
Oh
that by
yeah,
now, but we're well and truly eradicated already. What I have
absolutely.
seen is they're actually, majority of them are here to actually help and support us. So they want us to evolve. They want us to reconnect with the galactics. It really is about that support, and they encourage us to be open to their connections as well.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough too. So, all right, got one of the questions here. Mix us something there again. One of my biggest struggles has been to conform to society because I know there's a big authorities out there than what we deal with in uniform or courts. So I can see how someone could be able to be lawless or become completely antisocial. Don't agree with it, just as an observation. Mick, you did have a question there before, mate. You were saying to fit it in there. I'm not sure if you asked that question or not. But I'll go to the next one there. So where are we going here now? Sorry, I lost myself. So William's asking if there's shady stuff going on, how to discern lies from the truth when dealing with these entities.
So this is where, again, how elevated you are in your consciousness will help you to actually discern the truth. um, Developing your intuition is one of the best things that you can do before going into these spaces. And one of the first things that I've had to learn how to do is get very clear on what feels right for me, because a lot of navigating through these realms is based on your ability to feel through the heart. It's the same as, like, even in life here, like human life, my lie detector is through the bloody roof. Like, you cannot lie to me. It's just, I just sniff out stuff from people straight away. I can sense when something is just not right. And it's because I've taken the time to develop my intuition. I've connected with my higher self. Because I have that in place, I can now use those tools when I'm connecting with other beings as well. So if you were afraid of that, I would suggest, well, start with humans. Expand your intuitive ability with humans. Get to know if somebody has a good vibration. Get to know if somebody is lying to you. If you can do it with humans, then you can extend that skill out to non-human intelligences as well.
Yeah, fair enough. So, what are your thoughts then too? When like you've obviously had encounters, not you personally, but like there's encounters out there that like people have actually gone missing from these encounters. So, like for example, Fred Valentich is a good one there, where he's had a um a encounter with some sort of craft there and never came back from that. Like, what any thoughts are behind that? Like, what's that sort of concept?
Let me just turn my light on for a second.
Yeah, right.
I'll come back.
I'm going to read through the comments here. So, thanks guys for joining in. I hope you're all loving the show so far. It's
Yeah, it's
any
nice to
last
see
questions
so
here?
much
Sorry.
engagement and interaction. I always like when we do live shows because I get to really bounce back and answer people's questions as well.
That, that's what I
So
love too.
yeah, so the question was around with people who go missing, right?
Yeah.
Now, well, I mean, I just think there's a lot of strange things in this universe. And at the end of the day, I'd rather know what those things are than be ignorant. I guess that's ultimately where my final stance is. I think there is more to the universe out there. And I think that yes, maybe people did go missing. I don't know why. I don't know who took them. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're alive. I think they're all great questions. I'm on the same journey of trying to find those answers to figure out what really is our universe made of. And I personally am done with shoving my head under the rug. I want to know what's out there. I want to know who's out there. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what their agendas are, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And the first step is to elevate your consciousness so that you can be part of it. The last thing you want to do is just be completely ignorant, pretend like none of this exists, and have no answers to anything. So I'm just as much seeking answers to some of these questions as you guys are.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough too. It's pretty hard hitting questions here, and some of them, man, it's just like one of those questions. Like, well, I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer for that because there's no explanation for it at this point. So yeah, sorry, Mick, I missed your.
Some experiences that I've heard about, I just think, even with my years and years of research experience, I still feel like there's so much more that we need to learn. And I feel excited by that. I mean, I really like this idea of exploring consciousness to its max. I mean, that's something that I really thrive on. And it excites me to know that there's so much out there. And even though I feel deeply sorry for people who've had these sorts of negative experiences, I really hope that these people weren't hurt, weren't tortured, or killed, or I really sincerely hope that. But even if they were, I think the best thing we can do is gain knowledge around that, right?
Yeah. I sort of feel like the biggest thing is like obviously knowledge is going to be the more powerful thing here, but even just like being able to open up and approach the whole topic. You know,
Mm.
there's a few people out there who will help out, and like therapists and such, like who sort of deal with the abductees and such. That's probably the biggest part there, to go and reach out towards them, to go and try and seek that sort of help. Going to your general doctors and like GPs and hospitals and saying, "Hey, look, I'm being abducted by aliens here." They're going to be looking at you pretty strangely, going, "Well, look, here's some meds here because you're looking a bit crazy. You might be, seeing things, or mental issues here. We're going to get you a bit of help here with some drugs." That's that sort of concept.
Yeah.
Um, but like I was saying, like there's people out there that will help. And I think the biggest part is just coming forward openly about it and stop being afraid and setting yourselves back in your own sort of anxiety, if that makes sense. I'm blabbling now, I'm sure I'm hoping I'm making sense. Yeah, sorry, Mick, sorry I missed that question there before, mate. So he's asking, have you had a connection that showed in warmth or with a yellow glow at all? Have you felt your connections have intervened in your physical life at all?
It sounds like there's two questions there. So what
Yeah.
was the first one?
So have you had a connection that showed in warmth or with a yellow glow at all?
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a common experience, and a lot of my clients would have experienced that as well. One of the things that I know is different beings come through in different color frequencies. So, and typically, if something comes through in like you're describing as a warm glow, it sounds like it's coming from a very loving vibration. Because also, I know that negative entities, they'll feel cold and prickly. So if something comes through and it's nice and warm, that's generally a sign that that's something that you can trust. And as far as the golden yellow energy goes, I mean, there are lots of beings in the planet that can appear that way. Sometimes, though, and I just want to say that there is also crossover between like extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings and spirits, and people often confuse the two. So sometimes, like what you're describing, I actually see more often as a deceased loved one coming back, and not so much like a being from another planet. So I would want to, I would invite you to investigate a little bit more deeply and discern the frequency of that, because when you're dealing with the non-human, or when you're dealing with the spirit energies, sometimes different things get lumped together.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, so what are your thoughts on the whole, the alien concept of the spiritual paranormal side of things? What's your thoughts on all that?
Well, look, I mean, I think a lot of people just lump all of that together. They put it all in the same bucket because to them, it's everything unknown. Everything that's non-physical is paranormal. But I
Yep.
think there's a very distinct difference between beings that are, like, for example, deceased ancestors that have passed on that are now appearing through mediumship or that sort of thing. Then there are galactic beings that come through in very specific frequencies. There are paranormal beings of all variety that come through in very specific frequencies. Again, we go back to the analogy of the radio. What are you tuning into? Now, there is crossover between all of them as well. Like, there are situations where, because we are multidimensional beings, right? We're multidimensional beings. there are scenarios where a deceased loved one can then, after they've passed on, appear in UFO form because their soul aspect is galactic. So now we're getting into some very complex topics here. And I've actually had this experience because when I was in Tasmania recently, I was connecting with there's a friend of mine who I traveled in Serbia with. In fact, at the time that I was traveling with this friend of mine, we saw a UFO, got a photograph of it. It's now been published on the Birmingham UFO webpage. They've done up a full report with Dave Hodrian. He's done a photo analysis and put all that there. So at the time I was hanging out with this friend. He, his father passed away. We were kind of talking about that, and I was kind of connecting in with that. Fast forward a few months, I went to Tasmania and I was connecting in with UFOs, and then this energy comes to me. I knew it was his father that was coming through to me in that moment. And as I was tuning in, I then saw a flash of light in the sky. And that's when I sort of realized, I'm like, after his transition, this soul has gone on to a different form on a starship and is now connecting with me. So if you can wrap your head around that, that's where overlap happens, because it's all soul consciousness, and consciousness can move and change form at any time. So the consciousness that is in a human body can become a different form of consciousness. It can appear in different ways as well, whether it's coming through as more of a like a deceased soul spirit, which is what I sense with this yellowy sort of warm energy, or if it's coming through more as like a galactic frequency, which again has a very specific vibration to it.
Yeah. Okay. So the second part of this question too, have you felt your connections have intervened in your physical life at all?
I wouldn't say intervened. I would say they assisted in many ways. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just going back to the earlier stages of my journey back in 2015, I first connected with the Arcturian beings, and they gave me these codes and then asked me to facilitate the ceremony, right? Now, the first thing I want to be very clear on is anything they ask of me is always a request. I am not forced into this whatsoever. There is always free will. I can say no. Saying no generally doesn't work out well for me, but I can if I wanted to. So I've just learned over time that, when you get little guidances, it's probably for your best good, and you're probably better off trying to do it. And also there are moments when you can say, no, this is too much, or I'm not up for this mission. Please ask someone else to do it. And they will absolutely honor that as well. So there is some people out there that are quite scared and saying that, well, are they controlling us? Like, just because they're telling you to do it, you're doing it. You're like a slave or a prisoner. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm doing this very willingly of my own choice. And if I don't want to do something, I don't have to do it, but I want to work with them for the cause of bringing interplanetary peace. And so when they guide me or say, do this, even something as simple as, Anthony, like come and be on this show today, right? Like that could be a guidance that I would get. And I know that that I can say no to that, but I'm not going to, because I want to be here and I want to fulfill this cause and put the message out there, right? So that's an example of some guidance that I might receive. Now, just coming back to the question, could you just pop it there on the screen again? I think it was felt connection that intervene in your physical life. So and when it comes to assisting, the ripple effect of that has been that it has influenced my decisions in life, because after receiving those codes and seeing those three people in the room having the contact with the Arcturian starship, I was like, oh wow, there's actually something in this. So obviously that experience changed my life, right? I mean, that was the moment for me where I switched careers. I then eventually I opened a studio in Perth. Then that evolved, and then I went into online coaching. I now have a global audience. So in that regard, there's been a lot of interaction, and I would even say guidance from these beings to help me build my life, to build my business. One of the things I have done quite a lot of is in the space of business mentoring as well, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, right? So I built my business through connecting with ETs, right? That's how I did it, right? So, and I had business coaching and stuff as well, and there's a whole other journey behind that. But one of the things that I help entrepreneurs do is I help them get more connected, because when they get more connected, they start to see more abundance. They start to see their health improve. They start to see their business exploding, because they're now coming from a place of that guidance, rather than trying to just flail in the dark with their eyes closed, trying to build a business, which if anyone here is an entrepreneur, you know how challenging that is, right? It's not easy. I'm sure, Anthony, as well from doing the podcast and that there are challenges that come with that. But what if you had guidance? What if you had this connection with these beings who could advise you, not boss you around, but just like having these extra coaches behind the scenes guiding you towards the best actions or the best next play in what you need to do. So in that sense, I wouldn't say it's an intervention, but I would say it's an assistance that I've received as a result of that. And the result of that has been I've been able to heal myself. I've been able to grow my business. I've had massive abundance. I've learned about energy. So many things have happened. And intuitively, my gifts have increased, all because of these connections that I've developed with these galactic beings who I have been able to learn from.
Yeah, that's good. If only they could assist everyone in the world in that sort of regard. It seems to be like only you and special other people sort of get that sort of assistance for some unknown reason. But
Well,
so,
anyone can do it. It's a process. I mean, every day I get clients in the 5D empire telling me stories of how they've connected. And as a result of that, suddenly they've got, like, I had one client, she only signed up a month ago. She's had her best day in business to date, and just within the first month of signing up, she's connected with a couple of her galactic guides. She's connected with some of her energy spirits. It really is just about committing the time and getting the help. It's like if you want to lose weight, you would go to the gym, get a personal trainer, get a nutritionist to help you out, right? If you want to connect with ETs to improve your life, get yourself a mentor, get a guide who can support you in that, and then you just follow the process. It's really straightforward if you want to commit to that.
yeah, it's fair enough. Like, hopefully people who do want the assistance there and sort of go along those sort of lines there, I hope it does work for them. I'm going to take your word and it does work. If it's that good. But I've got another question here too, which is something I'm going to sort of run along the lines of paranormal here. So I obviously got the cryptid beings and such like that as well. So Jane's asking here, have you had contact with a Yowie? Some people have seen UFOs and balls of lights around them and such. And like then you also got the then the concept of going like werewolves and vampires and these sort of stories there of ancient sort of things. Where where would you go along these lines with it comes to alien beings and such like and like particularly Yowies because Yowies seems to be a big or Bigfoot one of those the big of the cryptids aspects.
Well, let's draw firstly a very clear distinction between, like, say, werewolves and vampires and galactic beings. I put them in
Mhm.
very different categories,
Yeah.
but I understand there's a lot of connection between various paranormal groups and beings. I personally haven't encountered a Yowie, probably because I've never tried looking for one. Hasn't personally interested me. I'm sure they exist, and I have heard from some people that I've spoken to. I've interviewed people who are interested in Bigfoot and things like that, and I have heard very similar encounters that there a lot of UFOs and things show up. But sometimes the UFO, like when I talk about UFOs, I'm often referring to starcraft from galactic beings, but UFOs can also just be like energy orbs of light. And sometimes what they're seeing is the orbs or the energy balls, because that's how these beings travel around. So again, within the spectrum of UFOs, there's a lot of different types. They're not just all starcraft. There are some of them are interdimensional portals. You even get elementals beings. Like I've connected with fairies and goblins and some of those energies as well. And they come through in different ways. So I think UFO is a very broad term, and I'm not surprised that where there's paranormal activity, people see UFOs, because they could be any form of dancing light or structure that is associated with the paranormal activity that's going on, which most likely is connected to that specific being or that frequency, and it's a portal or some charge of energy that's surrounding that.
Yeah, fair enough. Because obviously, like over the years, there we've talked about vampires, and I'll focus on the vampires and werewolves. So like, there's obviously stories come from somewhere, and then you got the cryptids of today, like the skinwalkers and such like that. And, like whether it's a negative realm or something like that, or if it is some sort of other being of dimensional races or something like it's hard to sort of like understand where everything's all sort of coming from. Like obviously we always depict aliens or beings of that nature from outer space, from another world somewhere else, but they're interdimensional, something like that in regard. But then you got these cryptids here that seem to be bound to this earth, or where they're interdimensional as well. It's really confusing to sort of trying to get a really narrow answer on the whole concept of things.
I can give you a bit of a framework around this. So again, if we go back to this analogy of using the different radio stations, right? Imagine that each dimension is a specific bandwidth, right? Like each dimension is, say, one station that you can connect to, but then inside that station there's substations, and think about it like this, like here in Australia, we've got a pop channel, we've got a rock channel, we've got a electronic channel, we've got a old school music channel, right? So there's all these different channels, and then inside those channels you've got different shows. Like the pop channel might have a talk show, and then it might have a comedy thing, and then it might have a like back-to-back music for an hour. So there's all different shows within that. So think about the channels as like the main dimensions, and think about the shows as like sub-dimensions. So there's 13 dimensions. 12 of them have 12 sub-dimensions, which is where the 144 comes from. It's across a lot of spiritual texts. And then you've got the 13th dimension, which is the 0 point, right? And that the 0 point is actually how you traverse dimensions. So every time you're crossing from one dimensional frequency to another, what you're actually doing is you're going through the 0 point and then out the other side and changing channels, right? It's kind of like the 0 point is the knob, like it lets you move, but you have to tweak it. So, yep. And that's why you can say in some instances that the 13th dimension is everything, because the knob can take you to any of those frequencies, right? But you have to turn the knob every time. So yep. In each different bandwidth, you've got different types of beings that exist there. And a lot of the paranormal type stuff comes from what I have kind of referred to as the fourth dimensional astral realm, because inside the astral realm, it's still a very polarized realm. And that's where a lot of the shadow world beings exist. So like vampires and stuff, werewolves would exist in the shadow worlds, right? And that's fourth dimensional. But then as you go up higher into the realms, you've got, for example, the angelic realms are in like say 11D, 12D vibrations. So they're a completely different spectrum. So when you're tuning into the angelic realms, you're not going to find werewolves in there because they're a completely different bandwidth. They're at a different frequency altogether. But there are some similarities between the way that they all appear, because they're all using interdimensional jumping in order to come across into the 3D. Make sense?
Right. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So how would you explain then? Obviously, I think you just did then, but obviously people are seeing these things randomly. There's no real seems to be any deliberate purpose in trying to see these things. It always seems to be mistaken, or a quick glance of these things, coming into view or something like that. And we talk about individuals like turning into the different vibrations, but you can have multiple people there at the same time there, whether they're vibing off the same sort of vibrations together or something, and they all see these cryptids for whatever reasons, or this spacecraft or whatever.
So in that scenario, what's actually happening is the being is coming into 3D, and that's why it's visible.
Yeah, fair enough. I think you just answered that. Yeah, so that's all right.
Because
that's all. I was just making sure, just making it clear.
Where we have our 5 physical senses. So of course we can connect with beings in all different realms by tuning our consciousness, but there are moments when they come into 3D as well. And if you're having a mass sighting, it's obviously in a 3rd dimensional vibration, because it's now taken on physical form that can now be seen by everyone.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That makes sense. That's all good. Look, I think we'll finish it there. I've got no more questions for you here, and it's we'll punch on nearly 2 hours now. So, but look, look, I'm obviously you're open for people to get in contact with you if they want to learn more about you, what to do, and all sorts of stuff. Like, where can people find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active on Facebook, Instagram, and also my website, which is listed here, which is www.eeshapatel.com. That's EESHAPATEL. Also, if you search that on YouTube, you'll find activations. And if you are interested in joining the 5D Empire Vault, we have 100+ activations that will actually teach you how to connect in a very step-by-step simple process. So just find me on any of those channels, send me a quick DM, and I'll be more than happy to help you out.
No, that's wonderful. Look, Eesha, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. It's absolutely wonderful. And look, I've learned a bit. I'm going to hopefully, give your guidance a bit of a trial here and see if it actually works. And I'm hoping it does work. I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to hold you to it. I want my money back otherwise. But it's wonderful. I hope people have learned a lot here as well, and something to take from this all. So absolutely, again, wonderful having you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anthony.
All the best. Catch you next time. And that will do it, folks, for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. And don't forget, if you or someone you know has had an encounter, please get in touch with me to be featured on the podcast. If you're a fan of the show, you can support the podcast by purchasing some awesome merchandise that's available on our online store via the link provided in the episode description. So thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Encounter Down Under. Hooroo!